What's up, guys? It's John with National Sports Entertainment, and I wanted to go further into the Pat McAfee Stooge scripted corporate response saga series that I've set up. This is going to be officially the second one on the playlist, and the reason for it being Pat McAfee right now has a very important role, and unfortunately, as much as it would like to say, oh, well, his role is helping wake people up, it's not. All he's doing is playing damage control. My last video, I literally watched 90 seconds of his take on why the NFL, why it just absolutely unequivocally cannot be rigged. And that was enough for me to just basically give out the video I did last, about Pat McAfee. It's about a 3-minute video, not even. I think it's 3 minutes or something. And it just goes into literally everything we predicted this man would say, he said, and doubled down on. So we're ahead of the narrative. You can see the officials are being blamed like we said they would. And what I decided to do is I'm going to do my best Pat McAfee impersonation. And just because I watched the whole entire thing afterwards, of course, after putting out my video. And I just think it's very interesting how a lot of this lines up. So let's listen to, I'm actually going to do, like I said, an impersonation, and then just to explain why I don't think any of this makes sense and why these things are being said. They're good talking points. If you just hear them, then they might make sense to you. But if you really question them, they don't. So let's go with it.
But why didn't you blow your fucking whistle then if you're going to do that? I don't know what the proper procedure is for that. We'll be talking to Gene Steratore tomorrow.
Here we go.
On this particular program, we will certainly ask all of the questions about procedure and protocol for that whole thing. Because could you not, after the play has already been run uninterrupted with no whistles, and they're not able to pick up the first down, now it's fourth down, which is a fucking pretty meaningful turn of events there. Could you not fix the clock afterwards because you didn't stop it? Instead, Ron Torbett, who is not necessarily the greatest ref in the history of the NFL, he was in the Super Bowl last year when the Bengals played against the Rams, and Logan Wilson in the fourth quarter late gets a phantom PI from that crew. I don't think it's the same crew as Ron. Ron was certainly the head ref of that crew, but it all kind of ties in together. That 3rd and 9 situation certainly warrants a lot of question marks about why the fuck is this how you guys decided to figure this out. But on the flip side, it feeds. It absolutely pours gasoline onto the fire of the NFL being rigged and wanting Patrick Mahomes and a new dynasty back into the Super Bowl. Andy Reid taking on his old team, the Philadelphia Eagles.
What?
The Kelsey Bowl happening.
What?
If you start thinking about how great it is to have the Chiefs and the Eagles, because the Eagles had already been decided, so if they're just booking this in real time, once the Eagles go in, boom, we need the Chiefs to go in, and they're purposely fucking the Cincinnati Bengals, you can start putting some things together where you're like, I could see how that could be the case. With that being said.
All right, so let's see just where the first thing that I find very interesting, and, isn't this the face of a man we can all trust? Actually, I should probably just stop the video right now. I mean, Pat said he's bringing on this man, and to me, that's enough. I mean, this guy looks like a totally trustworthy guy. He looks nothing like a politician, and I think he's going to tell the utmost truth. Now, why is he having Gene Steratore on? The same reason for the first time all season, Gene Steratore was disagreeing with the referees when Romo would bring him up. Hey, what'd you think of that? Yep, bad call, bad call, bad call. Why was Gene doing that? The same reason Pat is now saying the referees suck. They're doing the same thing they did a couple years ago where people are questioning more than the refs. So they are just quintupling down on this notion that it has to be the referees' incompetence. So Gene Steratore is going to explain to us, and I hope you like my Pat McAfee impersonation. I tried to do my best. But he's going to explain to us. I haven't seen this one yet, so I'll be doing that one too. But explaining probably, I'm guessing what happened is Pat quote presses him, and then Gene goes on to agree with him, and then they just talk about how they need to reformulate it. So this next point is a very good one. If you just hear this point, you might think, there's some sense there. But I think it's a weak one, and I think it's easily rebutted. So let's take a listen.
The amount of people that would have to be in on it. And the amount of money that all these people would have to be paid would have to be so astronomical that they wouldn't tear down the entire league. There's only like 20 states or 17 states that have legal sports gambling, and that's where everything revolves around. All the people that don't maybe gamble, all the people that just know of legal sports gambling or what sports gambling used to be, their first thought is, oh, this is crooked, this is corrupt, this is this. Because you have the Black Sox that happen in baseball. Sure. You have college basketball things that have happened throughout the history of college basketball with one or two players being in on the take. And you have the ref, Tim Donaghy, whenever he was reffing for the NBA, who was in on it. So there is certainly examples of this in the past. But the NFL, if they wanted to just throw away their league when there's only like 17 states that have legal sports gambling, when there will be at least 47, I think, Utah's never going to get it.
Nope.
California and Florida are going to be tough.
It's going to take a long time.
But I think that
kind of open season everywhere else.
Yeah, there's like 46, maybe 47 states are going to have it. So you would have to think that the NFL was so good at business that they would want to rig the games to have their big superstars in the games. But you're not giving them credit to be good enough for business to have the forethought to maybe wait a couple of years whenever there's a lot more money on the line. I just think the amount of people that would have to be in on it and the amount of money that people would have to pay, and obviously this is too reasonable to even say this to anybody on the internet, that's just an absurd way to think. I do think, though, we have a massive officiating issue.
All right, so once again, one might say some valid points were made. I disagree. The first thing he does is literally right after they do a What Stone Cold promo, which, after saying the league cannot be rigged, he goes on to say how, right? You'd have to pay all these people all this amount of money, and it's impossible. Well, this man is literally, and his crew, paid tens of millions by FanDuel alone to give people bad picks. On top of that, I know he must be getting some compensation from the NFL and from, or at least ESPN or one of the networks, because he was forced to leave WWE for college. So this isn't something where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, he's only getting, money from one outlet. He's getting money literally from a company that said, listen, you have to come back and basically play damage control during the college season and the rest of the NFL season, or you're not ever going to be allowed back. So that's why Pat left WWE, and that's why he transitioned so well into WWE. Now, again, something that's interesting, he brings up why do you think the Black Sox were brought up? Well, the same reason they bring up Pete Rose. They want somebody that they can attach cheating to because they understand that it wasn't the Black Sox, it was the entire league. So they can't say that. So they have to scapegoat the Black Sox. They did it to the Astros just a few years ago. Then they brought in a new manager to play cleanup. So anyway, what's interesting about all of those things is Tim Donaghy. And the reason I brought up this man, if you're not aware of him, you can watch his interviews. He has a few of them, but the ones where he talks about sports gambling, as Mr. McAfee puts it, this guy literally comes out and says how he knew, it's Michael Francesi, my apologies. He comes out and says how he quite literally knew a dozen different sports gamblers, referees that were gambling, and none of them were on his payroll that were named Tim Donaghy. So this Tim Donaghy thing needs to stop. Okay, Tim Donaghy was telling the truth. Okay, this man came out and had no reason to put himself further in the crosshairs of the league by saying it wasn't just me. But he did. And people want to just say, oh, yeah, he just didn't want to take the blame. He was already punished. It was like a Jordan Belfort situation. He snitched on the friends because they were all guilty. So he came out and says how this is Tim Donaghy, how they are told before the games, hey, you screwed up last game. Now you're going to call fouls on this team, that team, the other team. And he goes on to say how they're all in on it. And this guy wasn't the head official. He had Joey Crawford ahead of him. He had many officials ahead of him. There's no way this man would have been able to get away with it rogue. Furthermore, Michael Francesi's like in his mid-70s. I know he looks really good for his age, but he is. And he was working way before Tim Donaghy was. So, again, this goes way deeper than Tim Donaghy. And whenever that gets brought up, I almost sense desperation. So, it's just like Pete Rose. It's just something very interesting. Now, the best point he might make is why ruin it now, right? You're just getting it started. And the league, they're great business people is what we're saying, right? No, I never once said they were great business people. I said they are people who rig leagues and they should take lessons from the wrestling community because Vince McMahon, as you'll hear in a couple of seconds, as Pat contradictory points out, Vince McMahon runs a much tighter operation. So everyone's on the same cue. It looks flawless, and they're actually looking more realistic than the NFL. The sad truth is, this isn't like a cash cow that he's acting like. The ratings for the NFL have plummeted. They fell so bad and this is just the truth, when they decided politics were going to be the way to go. They fell so bad that for the first time since the inception of WWE Raw, they actually flipped Monday Night Football in ratings. They never did it even in 1 week. So the whole thing is very interesting that he's insinuating the league's at its best now. No, it's not. It's maybe now because they added the script back into it and really inflated the script. But for the last several years, the league, the NBA, the NFL, they were both down. So because of the approaches they took. So again, the two things he's alluding to here are FanDuel is like the only way people can actually sports gamble, which even if you live I live in Florida, it's basically legal all throughout the state. And they're acting like it's tricky. So you can see that they're really underplaying how easy it is and how many people actually don't use FanDuel to do their gambling. And furthermore, he's just subliminally just pushing FanDuel as like the only legitimate one. Like if it's not FanDuel, it's a crime. Which we could get down to the semantics of that, but the point is you can get on a boat. They have them in a lot of states and literally go an hour off the coast and do exactly for, what they're doing on FanDuel, and it's perfectly legal. So that just makes no sense to me either. Because again, these players, in my opinion, they're just bad actors. He keeps blaming the refs. Oh, it's the officiating. The Gene Steratore is going to help us figure it out. We've been calling out the officials. But this man calls wrestling. This man, oh, thanks, Heather. I don't even have Facebook anymore, so I'm actually being cyber hacked by somebody. Anyway, I don't have any social media, guys, just so you know. So whoever is if anyone sends you something from any of my social medias, it's not me. I can't even get into it to report it as hacked. So yeah, my Twitter, all of them. It's pretty crazy. But back to the point, I just don't understand his logic. I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to insinuate again, this we're just getting to the point where people are gambling. No. It's been happening for so long that now they are milking the cow because people are already waking up to the fact that it's rigged. It's not the officials. It's not what Trevor Lawrence said. We've been calling it out all year, as have other people with ulterior motives, but we've been calling it out. So my point is, it's not like they're losing money on the gambling aspect. And the biggest point is, and he's going to bring this up himself just so you know, they're not a great business. They can't do what McMahon does. They can't run a script that looks organic. They've tried, and you can see what's happening. So yeah, this notion that I am giving them credit for being smart or in touch, I'm not. It doesn't mean that they're not going to still try and pull the wool over our eyes. But let's see what he says next.
Yeah. I think refs suck. And not all refs. There are some refs that suck. And they shouldn't be in playoff games. Why are they in playoff games? Especially when there's only 2 games and there's going to be 50 million people watching. That's a great question. We've been talking about the officiating stinking for a long time. Yeah. I got tweets from a lot of Ohio fucks over there in Cincinnati who are diehard Who Dey fans and Bengals fans. Why don't you use your platform and why don't you try to make the NFL better for once? Why don't you not candy coat it, not dance around it, not be the fake funny guy that you are, and why don't you call it the NFL for officiating? So this morning, I dove through our Twitter account, and we've literally been talking about this since 2018 about how full-time refs optically would just look much better to everybody. Because you got part-time refs and they're not full-time refs, there's a chance that they could be maybe swayed by somebody outside the NFL. Since they're not completely committed to the NFL, there's a chance that somebody outside could get a hold of them. Now, I think they get paid well. But what is well? What is the line? Especially with how much money is potentially being made off of these games and off of these deals and off these advertising deals and the sports gambling and everything like that. What is good money in comparison to? So you make them full-time, boom, we can eliminate that distraction of potentially getting swayed elsewhere. Like all politicians, because they don't get paid enough, so they're easily swayed by big pharma, big gas, fucking alcohol, tobacco, whatever. You can get named into it. That's where all the money comes from because they're able to be swayed because they don't make enough. Compared to who? They don't make enough in doing their job, so they're easy swayed. So it's like kind of a little bit of a battle optically to watch and say, yeah, that's real, yeah, that's not. With the NFL, the officials not being full-time and the officials being terrible at what they're doing and the way these games are being scrutinized at a different level because how big the fucking league is and how many eyes are on there. And with all the money coming in with us putting our actual money on these games now legally, it's going to get called into question. Tone Diggs, you put a tweet out last night that I loved. I didn't just enjoy it. I fucking loved it because it was a hilarious take. And obviously you got attacked and bamboozled about it, but we will talk about the reaction to your tweet afterwards. But your tweet is a very real thing. What Tone Diggs tweeted was he understands the fact that there's people that think it's... No, you said that you love the fact that there is people that think that the game is rigged. Right. You also love the fact that as soon as you read that, you can tell that the person who wrote it has no idea what the fuck they're talking about. Could you please elaborate on that a little bit, Tone Diggs?
Basically, what you just so eloquently said is what I was thinking too. You have to, for the NFL to rig a game, everyone has to be in on it, right? Like, you've been in a locker room, AJ's been in a locker room, AQ's here, D-But's here. None of you guys have ever heard anything about any rigging, any...
Coach Pagano.
Who's up top, okay? Like, there's no way that you could rig an NFL game and make sure the outcome that you want happens strictly by a ref or two. Like, there's no way that can happen. And to your point, there's so much more money to be made in the future. Why would you do it now?
So you're saying they're great business people, that's why they're rigging games. And they're classified as entertainment. I don't think that's happened since 2015, but they were classified as an entertainment, and that was their way, being good business people, to get out of having to fucking pay taxes.
Right.
So, like, people are... All the claims about it are that they are good business people. Mm-hmm. This is Vince McMahon. This is WWE trying to flood the numbers, trying to make the best games possible. It's like, okay, so you're saying they're incredible business people that only care about the bottom dollar. Well, they haven't been able to be the tax-exempt crew since 2015. That whole thing changed. And if they were this great of business people, why would they ruin it now as opposed to the big fucking cash cow that's coming? But with that being said, the reason why it's being talked about is because how bad the fucking refs are.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't want to go through every take we've ever had about officiating and officials. We think there's a couple easy fixes. Make them full-time. That Sky Judge that they're using, but are they?
Yeah. No.
How about whenever the Devontae thing, obviously quickly that gets going, should have certainly been stopped, and there was that one view where it was clear that ball was moving. It should have been stopped in real time. It wasn't. But there was also a time where Zach Taylor challenged something, and then before he challenged, we had further discussion, and we don't think it's there. Right. Bengals fans don't remember that the NFL actually stopped them from using one of their challenges. Yeah, whenever he did the little pitch thing. Yeah. They stopped the Cincinnati Bengals from using one of their challenges and just overturned the rule in real time. Right. I think they should be doing more of that.
Oh, yeah.
I think that should be a part of it. Yeah. And I don't think that fucker should be in New York. I think that person should be on site and set them up with a place where they have all the review. Put them in a truck. Have them have their own fucking truck in the back where they have all the cameras. Make it be somebody that's young. No offense to the olds out there. I think the youngs are much more used to using things quickly, whether it's video games, cell phones, fast forward, rewinding. We're using those on our phones every single day. No offense to the olds. I didn't think you had the opportunity to do that. Although you do have things that you are better at. I believe when it comes to modern technology, a lot younger people probably better at using it more efficiently, quickly, and in real time without choking, because this thing all has to happen within 25, 30 seconds if it wants to go right. I think the XFL had a great version of it.
All right, so here he reveals himself, Pat, and as he, in his words, eloquently put, and the other guy eloquently put, Tony here, I love it just like he loves it. I love it when I see defense where somebody's acting defensive, and I love it even more when I see projection, because projection is by far the easiest way to predict somebody's next move. People do it all the time. They accuse others of exactly what they do. So what did he say? Why don't you use your brand, or why don't you use your time, however he I think it was brand, but to help fix the NFL fans? You know, why don't you help fix us with? And he's saying it's a technological issue which is going to cost millions of dollars. So again, instead of being the funny guy, instead of being the guy that's saying it's rigged, help everybody. Well, who's the guy that's being the funny guy who's misleading us? I do. I think it's going to be the Chiefs. So, in my opinion, I just don't think anything he's saying makes sense. Now, let's go into a couple things that I found interesting. Literally, right after he cuts his stone cold during the political spiel, he says how it can't be rigged and make the point I was just explaining to you guys. Vince McMahon is a genius. There has not been a person that loves or hates this man that has not come out and said this man is a genius, he's a psychological mastermind, and there's no businessman like him with his work ethic and with his prowess, his mental prowess. Now, you could like him or hate him, those are just the facts. But McAfee is here saying, oh, well, it can't be rigged, it's bad officiating. And if you notice, he keeps saying that they're choking and they need to act quick. Why do they need to act quick? Do they really need to act that fast in an important playoff game? Can they wait 5 seconds and then make sure it's right? No. The reason they have to act quick is because it's scripted and they need to make sure that everything they do is fitting into the script. That's why he's saying they're choking. That's why he's saying they need people on site. Why? Because they need to be more in communication with each other. He knows how wrestling works. This is a man that is 2 days removed from calling the Royal Rumble match. This is a man that had us convinced a 72-year-old could kick the shit out of him. If anyone watched WrestleMania last 2 years yet. I'm just saying, this guy literally is from WWE. He transitioned flawlessly. Then he says our point is that the NFL, they're great business people, so they wouldn't be this stupid. Here's the thing. People were waking up to the fact, on top of the ratings plummeting, people were already waking up to the fact that the NFL was rigged. This is not anything new. It wasn't just the officials. You saw the Benny Cunningham tweet I went over earlier, Jalen Ramsey, and then if you look at just Twitter in general, it's been going bonkers. Not just in the last weeks, it just now, he sees the numbers, he sees that it's tens of thousands, probably more than that, honestly, because that's just NFL rigged hashtagged. Okay, imagine the people that were talking about it that just didn't feel like hashtagging it. I don't hashtag my stuff, so I'm thinking millions were talking about this, and that is why he is now saying it's all the officiating. But then he says how a scripted XFL, which we could say is scripted or not, it's ran by a guy who scripts everything else, and he's saying how they run a much better product. Well, the only way they run a better product, there's no way they could run a better product unless it's the fact that they've been trained on scripted games. So again, he contradicts himself by admitting the XFL is doing a better job because the only reason McMahon is better at scripting these things, he's better with the camera angles, he makes sure these guys, like Patrick Mahomes can't, know how to sell injuries. It's pretty basic. And then Tony, all he does is just regurgitate what Pat told us. And I find it interesting because if they got slightly ratioed, then you'd understand, okay, maybe it was just a few people. They got ratioed to death to the point where they bring it up on this very thing. And they bring up how Tony got ratioed and got bamboozled because they were all pointing out how you guys make millions from FanDuel. You guys played in the league. How there's no way you couldn't have noticed these things because there were rigged events that happened when you guys were in the league. Why didn't you bring it up? They're being attacked so hard that they're just trying desperately to not only disassociate themselves from it, but just still convince us it has to be the officiating. So, in my opinion, this is just more exactly what we predicted would happen. How he would make this about officiating, how they would do everything they could to just transition it from the fact that players screwed up. And you'll see here he goes on to say, again, another thing we literally predicted would be brought up.
On Twitter with 27 to 28,000 tweets about it last night like this. NFL Twitter was live until 2 a.m. this morning because everybody was talking about how bad the NFL's reffing is. Now, they're using it in a version of which the reffing is so terrible that it has to be fake, has to be cooked. Mm-hmm. And I feel bad to tell the people this. Some of these refs just suck that fucking bad.
Yeah. Bingo.
And I think that's a tough thing for everybody to kind of get over, and I think that's reality. Now, we had a bunch of tweets and that got sent to Tone Diggs after Tone said, hey, come on. If you actually think it's rigged, you don't. And the reason why we're leading off of this, because this is a real thought.
Yeah.
And this is a real problem the NFL has.
Wow.
And I don't know if the NFL knows this, and I know there's some people that watch the show in the NFL offices, and we're being accused of a lot of things by a lot of people on the internet for not talking about this, even though we have hammered this home a lot. This is a real problem the NFL has to fucking fix. Cannot have the people thinking the NFL is rigged because of how terrible their officials are. Fix it. Here's somebody responding to Tone Diggs after Tone Diggs said, You don't know football if you're saying the NFL is rigged. The entire internet was saying the NFL was rigged. Here's B part. LOL, you guys make millions of dollars by getting your fans to gamble on shit that's scheduled and set up and produced like a Marvel movie. Of course you're about it, Big Tone. Here's another tweet that came in. Here's from Summers. Freemasons and Jesuits clearly been fixing games for decades. Y'all just too lazy and gullible to do any research. Clown is what Summers says to you, Tone. Here's another one. NFL has already stated in court there in the entertainment business, or sports business. It also doesn't have to be everyone in on the rig, just a select few people. Okay, so those select few people have to be at every single game and every single team and every single official crew, and then those select few people have to be quiet, what, forever?
Oh, yeah.
I don't understand how that would happen. Here's another one from Lance Rothgar. Kelsey Brothers and Andy Reid facing his old squad. Players are no way involved, but the NFL and the refs know when to make the right calls. Complete opposite, I think, Lance. They don't know when to make the right calls because they don't ever make the fucking right calls. Yeah. I think everybody's saying these things because they're giving the refs too much credit. You guys are acting like these refs would understand how to fucking rig a game. Sure. And I know Tim Donaghy was able to do it. In basketball, it's much easier. Because literally in basketball, you accidentally, boom, boom, bow, two shots. There's 2 points. You're literally putting 2 points on the board. And there's a couple calls that you can miss. The Devontae Smith one is certain.
And that's basically it. He goes on for another 4 minutes to go on about how he's upset about how he lost money gambling. Like we believe he's actually putting his money on it. But this is the most important. I already went over Tim Donaghy. And you see how much he is going after Tim Donaghy because he's the perfect guy to go after. You know, he kind of looks the part, and he was caught. And again, he wasn't caught. They were caught, okay? So they were caught, and what happens is they find one guy, and it happened to be Tim Donaghy. So, not this Tim Donaghy. But my point is, outside of, and again, the end, all he talks about is them betting. I didn't want you guys to have to listen to an hour of not only his ridiculous, obnoxious voice, but my equally monotonous voice. I wanted to go into it because, again, you could just tell when somebody is being scapegoated. Now, again, they go on to say they had to expose, they had to show all the stuff that was being said on Twitter because they got ratioed to death. It wasn't like it was 1 out of 10 people, or they wouldn't have showed it. They would have just shown the fringe, the one guy that said it was Masons, and I think it is Masons, but they like to kind of paint those people as the fringe people. But they stayed completely away from everything else. And they did a good job of what I call anchoring. Anchoring is kind of where you kind of wedge two things together. And it just makes it fly, like where people don't even pay attention to the middle part. So he goes on to say, and again, it's something I found very interesting. He points out how, they helped out the Bengals that one time. And he makes a very misleading statement that it's easier to rig the NBA. And it's not. Again, Mike Francesi went into this. He said, back in the 90s, it was way easier because you get a young athlete, tell them to shave a couple points. It's changed since then. Now the NFL is literally doing it themselves. All these leagues are doing it themselves. So the foul shots is a horrible comparison because, just like if you give somebody a first down that puts them in field goal range, it doesn't guarantee they're going to make the field goal. Foul shots don't guarantee you're going to make the free throws. Secondarily, the NFL referees have way, way, way more authority. Because when you're watching basketball, you're watching isolated play, okay? Like, when you watch a foul, even if you disagree with it. You see what they are calling the foul. The NFL, they don't even show you the foul. They literally don't even... Remember, you used to see a penalty, and we would see the yellow flag, and we would see where the flag was at, and then we'd be like, up to holding probably, up to illegal contact. They're not even doing that now. They're waiting until the players drop the pass or catch the touchdown, and then they do or don't. You'll see them with their hands on their holster for a good 5 to 6 seconds before they throw it. The game, the Bengals Chiefs, Romo even said it. He said, and again, Romo's a guy who literally predicts exact plays and scores beforehand, but somehow he missed the holding, he missed the whistle and everything on the one play. And then on a penalty, there's a false start called, and I heard a slight whistle, which again, what they do is they do blow whistles during the games, but if everything goes as planned, they don't throw the flag, and it gets chalked up to crowd noise. So I heard a distinct whistle on a penalty that was not called. It was a false start. Then they waited. The play was incomplete. And then they said, there was a false start on the play. And the Romo one, it was after an incomplete pass. And he goes, wait a second. Now we got a penalty in the backfield. Again, they didn't show us this penalty. I saw the referee. His hand was on his holster while the other guy tackled him. No flag. It came out right as a pass was dropped. So, again, it's just, to me, very interesting. And he's literally, this man goes ahead and says all of the things that we talked about. He goes on to say, yeah, it wasn't just the referees. It was 58 pushing him out of bounds late. It was this, it was that. And he just kind of wedges all these game-changing decisions in the middle of everything else. So, like, yeah, that 58-yard whatever, that's nothing. That literally turned a 57-yard field goal where they said this kicker topped out at 52 pregame into a 45-yarder, which I wouldn't call a chip shot, but it's a pretty nice kick. So my point is, nothing he is saying is making sense. You're seeing that he's just trying to focus on, the NBA is easier to rig. Let's get off the NFL, because more people are talking about the NFL. Nobody's talking about the NBA being rigged because the NFL is just right now, since it's more of a show, and since it's playoff time, they're getting the talk. And now when the NBA comes around, we're gonna have, I don't know, Pat Beverly or somebody. Maybe every scoundrel seems to be named Pat. So I'm guessing it'll be Pat Beverly will come out and play the role of Pat McAfee. He kind of already is. If you saw him go on and make the rounds on the shows, he's already playing the role of the anti-media. So I'm curious to see what happens with Pat Beverly. But yeah, like I said, everybody would have to get paid and they'd have to be quiet about it. Well, let's think about this for a second. As Pat just admitted, and like I it's just interesting how it's said that you'd have to pay him all this money, but at the same time, these quarterbacks are getting paid over $100 million. They're getting paid. Rodgers is getting paid $60 million a year. Okay, you only need, as people watch the Packers this year, you only need Rodgers, a referee, and a coach to throw the game. So he tries to swing it like, these same guys have to be at every game. No, you need about 3 or 4 guys that are on each team, which is only 120 so players and individuals that are in on it. It's not as ridiculous as he's making it seem. And then I guess he forgets that Larry Johnson ever existed, Jerry Rice, Tim Brown. They forgot Dwight Smith ever existed. I guess they just vanished into the ether because these guys came out and quite literally said it was rigged. They gave examples. They told people why it was rigged. And time after time I hear, how come people wouldn't come out? And there's 2 reasons. The one is people have come out. Here's Benny Cunningham, who got ripped off of Twitter after he came out. Jalen Ramsey came out and said how they were told to throw and let New England win. My point is, these players have come out. And the Ramsey one, people are trying to say is fake. I completely disagree because I used to be on Twitter a lot because I followed crypto and things of that nature. And that was a deleted tweet, I can assure that. But even if you don't want to take my word for it, Ramsey's not even relevant. Many players have come out and people just ignore him. They don't get the coverage. So I'd like to see Pat have Larry Johnson on the show. To me, that would really prove to me that Pat's an open-minded person that genuinely doesn't believe it's rigged, not that he's just being paid to tell us the opposite. So yeah, if you guys haven't seen Larry Johnson, Dwight Smith, I know a lot of people have that grievance too. Nobody's coming out. You have to understand, once you enter club superstar, you will be killed. They killed Michael Jordan's dad. Again, Michael Franchese said this too. Now, I'm not saying take everything this man says with a grain of salt, but I give him a lot more credibility than I give Pat McAfee. I'm sorry. So he came out and said, why do you think Jordan went to baseball? Do you think he wanted to go and bat 200 for the White Sox? No, he was forced to leave. They killed his dad. He came back. He was embarrassed. That's why he did so bad on the Wizards. You don't think people were betting on Jordan? So it goes so deep. My point is, it's been going on for a very long time. Now people are just waking up to it. And Pat is trying to get us to confuse people waking up to the league throwing itself when it's the complete opposite. It's no different than politics, as he put it. People start waking up in politics, so they start having controlled opposition come out left and right to play both sides. So it's the same thing here. There's, like I said, I didn't want it to be an incredibly long video. It's just really hard because this is literally 10 minutes of me doing my best impersonation, I should say, and trying to address everything in great detail. And this is why they'll never give him a live mic. This is why he's right when he says, they won't even let me at the games to just talk, because he always contradicts himself. He says, the money, there's no way they'd be able to make the money after he's bragging about all the money he made. And then you see the contracts. He just had Rodgers on the show saying, will you take a cut from your $60 million contract? I'm pretty sure that's enough. So people have to look at it. Yeah, they're getting paid, but their salaries are to throw the games. Their salaries aren't to compete. So the salaries is what they're getting paid in. Pat's acting like they're getting those salaries and then they're getting a cut on top of it. Why do you think these players are getting $30 million bonuses before they do a damn thing? I said this for years when I was a fan, when I actually thought it was real. I said, why wouldn't they offer incentives instead of the bonuses? If the players really gave a shit, then they would play well and they would earn their bonus through incentives, and probably more than the bonus if the incentives are good enough. And the owners just never set incentives, and this is the reason. It's so the salaries, they can get all this money, and then they can say, oh, well, you wouldn't have the money to pay them all. Well, you are paying them all off. That's the thing. Wrestlers are paid. These guys get paid just like wrestlers, So that's basically it. Like I said, I didn't want to have to go through the whole thing, but the final thing that was addressed was how it has to be, apparently Pat McAfee gambled and he's just as mad because he also picked the Bengals and the 49ers. So I'm very curious to see what happens when he has Gene Steratore on. And like I said, Gene Steratore, if this isn't the face of a man you can trust, then I don't know what is. I mean, this should just solve all of our qualms, right? This guy who also reffed NBA, I guess, for some kind of, I don't know if he did or not, or what, I don't even know the context, but my point is, this is the guy that they bring on every single week to tell us why the penalty was the right call. But for some reason, yesterday or Sunday, Sunday, he decided he was going to go against the referees on about half the calls. Except, as we pointed out live in our video, how they were going to give some accountability to 58. Why? Because that was a call that was obvious. Pat goes on that's what he says. He says, it was an obvious call. You had to call that one. That was a penalty. And the reason he says that is because people understand that these referees are not the only people throwing these games. So they have the referees look bad. Like I said, they planted the seeds all game. This is what we went over. This was a 30-minute video I went into a couple days ago. You might have seen it, but it was the one that's showing the Chiefs beat the Bengals. How he was going to go into the officials and then basically say, yeah, but that was a foul at the end, so that really made people convinced. And that's what they did. They planted seeds all game, but they made sure that final penalty was one that could not be blamed on the officials, because they want to blame the officials for everything, but at the same time, they also want to show it's not so ridiculous. And on that play, you couldn't blame the officials. So they got both of what they wanted, and they're creating this very confusing type of, it's almost like a Jedi mind trick, where no matter how you approach this subject, they can kind of just say, oh yeah, well, is it the officials or is it the players? It's both. And that's what they don't want people noticing. They don't want people noticing these officials are like WWE refs, where they're checking on the players throughout the game. Why do you think they're always like wisecracking, telling jokes to, like, you'll see a random player and ref just like talking? That doesn't happen, okay? Like, yeah, you're going to have it happening, but the referee's not going to go out of his way, which we see a lot, to like find the player, like, and they think the camera's off, and he's going to whisper something to him, and they're going to both laugh. That's not a normal circumstance. The officials are there to be officials. And that's why they call them officials, by the way. It's another distinction to avoid legality. Calling them referees indicates that they are refereeing a competitive sport, whereas officials, that could mean anything. It's a very open term. So they changed from referees to officials for a reason, and they want people to know that distinction. Just like they call these guys all superstars now. You notice that? So they're just copying wrestling. And as I said, the NBA comparison is just ridiculous. And I don't see how now and these days you can say the NFL is easier to rig because, again, most of the penalties we don't even see, and they literally admit they can call a penalty on every single play, which over the course of a game, yeah, that's 2 points in the NBA, but they score hundreds of points. In the NFL, if you give somebody 7 points, or you give them a much better chance of getting that, that's 20 to 30% of the points that the average team scores. 2 points is 5% of what an average team scores. So you can see how he's trying to trick people, but he's not doing a very good job. And there's one last thing that just stuck out with me, and there's nothing giant, but I wanted to cover every little thing. I'm not one of those people who just says, okay, let me try and find this, and I'll do this, and if this doesn't fit my narrative, then I'm not going to talk about it. That's why I literally cover the entire thing, and literally afterwards, the only thing talked about is, I hope and you can watch his whole video if you want to, his whole spiel. He goes on to just complain about how he's been losing because he thinks he thought they were going to win too. But he goes on to say how the refs are choking and it could be ran better. And that's the whole thing. They need to run this smoother. Smoother is the word we're hearing. We need a smoother operation. What does he mean by that? Does he mean we need more competent refs? Or does it mean WWE's got it right? We got to figure out how we can be like WWE. I think he means the second, especially when you hear his emphasis when he says, we have a problem. The NFL has a problem. With his anger and contempt, and then some condensation when he condemnation when he's saying, yeah, like, you guys think it's rigged, you're ridiculous. And he's kind of mocking anyone that thinks it's and knows it's scripted. So you can see so much projection here. But I just wanted to tackle every single one of his quote rebuttals, because I don't buy for a second that his league theory, the league's been tanking. It only revived when they decided they were going to copy WWE. And they don't have the business savviness of Vince McMahon. Ask Brock Lesnar, ask anybody. They'll tell you the same thing. So that's this one. Now I have to go watch another one of this Stooges videos because apparently he had Gene Steratore on. Like I said, he probably does a little fake pressing. Gene agrees with him, throws us a bone, and that'll be the talk for the entire offseason along with injuries. I wouldn't be surprised if they just did something, a complete revamp of the game, because this is not working. Every week more and more people are saying it's rigged, even when they're actively trying to make it not look or appear rigged. So, he brought up the narrative of the Kelsey Bowl and the Mahomes dynasty, so I guess that's what's going on Twitter. That wasn't even our reason. You know that. Our reasons for these things lining up the way they do. We don't always have the right picks, but again, I think it's more important to be over the target. And he's saying 25,000, that's misleading. Because that's 25,000 trending, like that are hashtagged. So there's way more people out there that are talking about it. They just might not be using NFL rigged or rigged NFL. Doesn't mean they're not calling it scripted or rigged or saying that there is something up with the game. But they're going to try their best to get us to hate these officials' guts. And I expect that to be prevalent on Sunday, where we probably have some of the worst officiating we've ever seen. In 2 Sundays, I mean. And that'll be the talking point. But I'm going to watch this Gene Steratore video. Of course, I'll have a recap. Today was a hard one because I woke up later. I wanted to get out the picks first because that's more important. But I want to continue to expose this dude. And like I said, he drops, he does these live things. Then he has like 15 different short clips that are 10 minutes. And it's going to be hard to stay, to be honest, ahead of the narrative with him. But I'm going to. So let's see if after Steratore is on today, if they cool down the talk. I have a feeling they're going to try and do something and then come on and do an I told you so thing, but nobody's going to buy it. But like I said, I'm going to watch that video now. Let's see if he presses Gene, and Gene does what he always does with Romo. Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. You're definitely right. But then gives kind of a loophole as to why it was okay what happened. So it'll be very interesting. I'm going to watch a couple of his stuff because this is the only video I've seen. I haven't watched the entire one. I probably won't have time to, but if you guys noticed anything else that was said in other videos, please let me know, because the only reason I even knew about it was because someone said, wow, exactly what you said he was going to say, he said. This was a couple days ago. And then, of course, that night he actually said, again, more of what we thought he would say. So we're definitely ahead of his narrative. They need a new script. It's a very obvious one. And again, it's just so comical. And this is something they would do, that a guy from WWE that is being paid by a sports book is not only preaching to us about how it can't be scripted, any player paid with Peyton Manning, but he's also telling us we're idiots for thinking that it might be scripted. Here he is right here, Pat's pick: Raiders, Packers, Steelers plus 9.5, and we're getting a boost. So again, the boost, no book is going to say, you know what, we want to pay you extra. No book in the world is going to do that. Pat knows that. For the brand, I genuinely think that's like a hidden meaning. Brand, he means NFL. He means, if you notice, the punters look a little kind of remind me of the Nike logo. So this guy's been bought and he's been bought and sold for a long time. But yeah, I'm going to continue this because I know there's a lot of people that might follow him and they want to believe he's good, but people are waking up to it. And I woke up to it. I saw he was doing it. When he came to WWE, I thought, hey, maybe he left the NFL and he's going to try and he got tired of it. And then when he went back, I was like, this is why he's back. They would not be getting him to come back for no reason. But they did. Again, he was forced to leave WWE, and he went back. WWE brought him back because they just care about business. They don't, they admit it's rigged, so they don't care if Pat's calling it. but the NFL needed him because they saw how good he was doing with WWE. So don't be surprised if he's like a color commentator next year. Like I said, they would never give him a hot mic, but he will have an earpiece in his ear, just like he did in WWE. So it'll be really interesting to see, the journey going forward. If he stops talking about it for a little bit, or if he keeps up and just keeps doubling down, which I have a feeling he might. So take care, everybody, and happy earnings.